There's a particular kind of moment that happens sometimes in the middle of an ordinary day. You're not doing anything unusual. Maybe you're driving somewhere or sitting at your desk or just staring out a window for a few seconds. And out of nowhere, a person crosses your mind, not because anything reminded you of them, not because anything happened, just a face, a feeling, a fragment of something that used to exist between you and another person, surfacing quietly and without warning, and for a second you just sit with it. And maybe a part of you wonders why, today of all days, that particular person came back to mind. I want to talk about that feeling, because I think a lot of people watching this right now have experienced something like it recently. And today, March 12th, 2026, with the moon moving through Gemini, that feeling has a context. It isn't random. It's part of a larger shift that's happening right now in the emotional landscape, and it has everything to do with the people in your life, the ones who are still close, the ones who have drifted, and the ones sitting somewhere in that complicated in-between. Gemini moon energy is restless in a way that's uniquely social. It doesn't let us stay inside ourselves for long. It reaches outward toward voices and faces and histories. It stirs up the part of us that is fundamentally connected to other people, that part that remembers, that wonders, that notices when something in a relationship has quietly shifted. And today, that part of you is more awake than usual. Something is moving in the space between you and another person. It might be someone you've lost touch with. It might be someone you see every single day but feel like you haven't really spoken to in months. It might even be a version of yourself that you used to share openly with someone before something changed between you. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Think about the last time you genuinely felt close to someone. Really close. The kind of closeness where things felt easy and understood. Now think about where that relationship is today. For some of you, that closeness is still there, just quieter than it used to be. For others, something happened. Maybe something big, maybe something small that grew into something bigger. And now there's a gap. A distance that neither of you has known how to close. And maybe you've spent some time wondering whether it's even worth trying, whether too much time has passed, whether the moment has come and gone. Today's energy suggests that the moment has not gone. It suggests quite clearly that something is opening up again. Now let me explain a little about what's happening astrologically today, because I think it helps to understand the backdrop of this energy rather than just taking my word for it. The moon in Gemini is emotionally restless in the best possible sense. It stirs things up. It makes us want to reach out, to talk, to reconnect. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication, of information, of the words we say and the ones we've been holding back. When the moon passes through this sign, our emotional world and our communication style start to work together more fluidly. Things that have been left unsaid begin to feel heavier. Things that need to be expressed start finding their way toward the surface. And people, real people who have real significance in your life, tend to reappear, either literally or in the quiet corners of your mind where you keep the things that still matter to you. This is not the kind of energy that forces anything. That's important to say. Nothing today is going to push you into a conversation you're not ready to have or drag a relationship forward before it's time. What today does is create conditions. It opens a door. It makes the air between people feel a little lighter, a little more possible. What you choose to do with that is entirely up to you. But here's what I want you to consider. How long have you been waiting for the right moment? Because I hear this so often. People talk about the conversations they've been meaning to have, the messages they've been meaning to send, the things they've been meaning to say to someone, and the reason they haven't is simply that the moment hasn't felt right. Too much time has passed. It feels awkward. They're not sure how it would be received. They don't want to seem like they're trying too hard, or wanting too much, or revisiting something that the other person has already moved on from. I understand all of that. I really do. But I also want to gently point out that this waiting, This indefinite, cautious waiting is its own kind of answer, and it's not always the answer we actually want to be giving. Today, something softens. Today, the energy supports vulnerability in a way that doesn't happen all the time. And I think that for a significant number of people watching this right now, today is the day that something begins to shift. Not because the stars are forcing your hand, but because something in you is finally ready to let it. Let me paint you a picture. Think about a friendship, maybe one you've had for years, one that used to feel effortless, the kind of friendship where you could go weeks without talking and pick right back up without missing a beat. And then something happened. Maybe it was life just pulling you in different directions. Maybe there was a misunderstanding that neither of you addressed directly. Maybe you both changed, grew in ways that felt incompatible for a while. And somewhere along the way, the easy silence between two friends who understood each other became a different kind of silence, the kind with a little uncertainty in it. For some of you, that friend has been on your mind today, maybe not consciously. Maybe it's just been a low hum in the background, a small wondering. And today's energy is asking you to pay attention to that wondering, because sometimes when a person keeps crossing our mind, it's not random. Sometimes it's an awareness our emotional self has picked up on before our rational mind has caught up. The moon in Gemini today is amplifying that emotional awareness. It's making us more sensitive to the threads that still connect us to people we care about. And for a lot of people, what's surfacing today isn't grief or loss. It's something quieter than that. It's possibility. A small, careful sense that something could be repaired, revived, re-understood. Here's another situation I want you to sit with. Think about a relationship that ended, not necessarily dramatically, but conclusively. A romantic relationship, a close friendship, a working relationship that felt like more than just professional. You parted ways, life moved on. And yet every so often something reminds you of that person, and it doesn't feel like pain exactly. It feels more like an unfinished sentence, like a chapter that ended mid-thought. Today's energy has a way of bringing those unfinished sentences back to mind, not to torture you with what was, but to give you the clarity to understand what it actually meant. And sometimes that clarity reveals something surprising. Sometimes when you look at an old relationship through the lens of time and growth, you realize that what ended wasn't the connection itself. It was a particular version of it, a version that couldn't survive the circumstances you were both in at the time. But people grow, circumstances change, and what wasn't possible then isn't necessarily impossible now. I'm not telling you to reach out to your ex. I'm not telling you to revive something that genuinely needed to end. What I am saying is that today is a good day to be honest with yourself about what you actually feel, not what you think you should feel, not what seems sensible or safe or appropriate, what you actually feel. Because the moon in Gemini today is creating a kind of internal honesty that doesn't always come easily, and it's worth paying attention to. Let's talk about what this might look like in everyday life, because I think it's important to ground all of this in real, recognizable experience. For some of you, today's shift might arrive as a message, a text from someone you haven't heard from in a while, an email that surprises you, a comment on something you posted that comes from a name you recognize, a name that carries history. And when you see it, something in your chest does a small, quiet thing. Not panic, not dread. Something more like recognition. Like your heart acknowledging something your head hasn't fully processed yet. If that happens today, I want you to resist the urge to immediately overanalyze it. The moon in Gemini can make our minds very busy, very quick, very prone to jumping ahead to every possible implication. Try to stay in the moment. Try to receive the message or the moment for what it actually is before you start spinning stories about what it might mean or where it might lead. Sometimes a reaching out is just a reaching out, and sometimes that's enough. For others, today's shift might not come from the outside at all. It might come from within. You might find yourself thinking about someone with a new kind of clarity, understanding something about them or about the dynamic between you that you hadn't quite been able to articulate before. Maybe you finally understand why a conversation went the way it did. Maybe you finally see something from their perspective that you couldn't see at the time because you were too close to it, too hurt, too defended. This kind of internal clarity, the quiet, non-dramatic kind, is one of the most underrated gifts that today's energy can bring. When we understand something, we can make a choice about it. We can decide what we want to do with that understanding. We can decide whether we want to act on it or simply hold it. But we can't make that choice while we're still confused, still carrying partial information, still filtering everything through the hurt or the distance or the version of the story we've been telling ourselves. Today's energy has a way of clearing some of that fog. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to see a little more clearly, and that alone can be significant. There's a third type of shift that I want to mention, because I think it's one that doesn't always get talked about in these kinds of conversations. Sometimes a relationship shift isn't about another person at all, not directly anyway. Sometimes it's about the way you relate to yourself in the context of your connections with others. Today, some of you might find yourselves having a very quiet but very important realization about what you've been accepting in your relationships, about the ways you've been making yourself smaller or quieter or more accommodating than you actually want to be, about the patterns you've been repeating, not because they serve you, but because they're familiar. The moon in Gemini has this quality of illuminating duality, the two sides of things. And one of the things it tends to illuminate is the gap between who we are and who we've been showing up as in our closest relationships. For some people, that gap is small and easily closed. For others, it's been widening for a while, quietly, almost invisibly. And today, in the light of this energy, it might become visible in a way that it hasn't been before. This is not a comfortable realization, but it's an important one. Because when you can see the gap, you can begin to close it. And closing that gap, beginning to show up in your relationships in a way that's more true to who you actually are, often creates a shift that touches everything. It changes the dynamic with the people around you. It changes what you attract. It changes what you're willing to tolerate and what you're willing to ask for. I've seen this happen for people so many times. Someone reaches a point of quiet but unmistakable clarity about a relationship. Not a dramatic moment, not a confrontation, just a still and honest recognition. And from that moment, things begin to realign. Sometimes the relationship shifts in response, and both people find a new and better footing. Sometimes it becomes clear that the relationship has run its course, and letting go becomes not just possible, but necessary. And sometimes the recognition leads to a conversation that should have happened a long time ago, a conversation that's difficult, but ultimately healing for everyone involved. Today's energy supports all of these possibilities. It doesn't prescribe which one is yours. It simply opens the space for something real to happen. Let me talk for a moment about courage, because I think that's actually at the heart of what today is asking from a lot of people. It takes courage to reach out first, especially when time has passed, especially when you're not sure how you'll be received, especially when a part of you is afraid that reaching out will confirm the worst, that the connection is gone, that you're the only one who still cares, that too much has changed. I understand that fear. And I also want to say plainly that it is one of the most common reasons people let relationships that still matter to them quietly disappear. The other person is often feeling the exact same thing. They're often thinking about you, too. They're often on the other side of the same hesitation, waiting for a sign that it would be okay to reach out, waiting to know that the connection would be welcomed rather than awkward. And so both people wait and time keeps passing, and eventually the moment feels so distant that neither person knows how to bridge it anymore. Today's energy, specifically the moon in Gemini moving through this emotionally open and communicative space, creates an unusual window. It makes the reaching out feel more natural. It softens the edges of things. It makes the gap feel crossable in a way that it may not have felt yesterday or last week. If you've been thinking about someone, truly, genuinely, persistently thinking about someone, I want you to take that seriously today. I want you to consider that your internal awareness, the part of you that keeps returning to this person or this relationship, might know something that your cautious, practical mind hasn't fully accepted yet. That something is worth tending to here. That the connection isn't finished, even if a chapter of it is. Now, I also want to be honest about something. Not every reconnection today will look like joy. Some of the shifts this energy brings will feel more like grief than reunion. Some of you will reach a point of clarity today about a relationship that isn't coming back. Not because the connection wasn't real, but because the timing, the growth, the circumstances have led somewhere different for each person. And if that's your experience today, I want you to know that clarity, even when it's painful, is still a gift. Because carrying the weight of an unresolved connection, the hope that won't quite die, the question that won't quite close, is its own kind of heaviness. And sometimes, when the fog clears and we can see something truthfully for the first time, the grief that follows is actually a beginning. The beginning of something in you that has finally been allowed to move forward. There's no wrong way to experience today's energy. Whatever it brings up for you, longing, hope, relief, sadness, the quiet excitement of something beginning, the quiet exhale of something ending, it's all valid. It's all part of the same shift. It's all part of what it means to be a person who has loved something and is learning, always, what to do with that. I want to share an observation that I think might resonate with some of you. There's a particular kind of relationship that I think about often. The kind that doesn't have a clean category. Not quite a friendship, not quite a romance, not quite a professional relationship, but something that contains elements of all of those things. A connection that formed in a specific moment or season of your life and meant something significant during that time. And then circumstances shifted and the relationship didn't fit the way it used to, and gradually, without anyone deciding to end it, it faded. So many people carry these connections quietly. They're not relationships you necessarily grieve openly, because they're not easy to explain to someone who wasn't there, but they leave a mark. And today, some of you might find one of these relationships surfacing in your awareness, not as a reminder of loss, but as a recognition of meaning, as an acknowledgement of the fact that something real happened there, that it counted, that it still, in some quiet way, belongs to the story of who you are. Sometimes that recognition doesn't require any action. Sometimes it just requires sitting with it, allowing yourself to appreciate it for what it was rather than measuring it by what it didn't become. But sometimes, and this is what today's energy is specifically amplifying, that recognition is a doorway. It's pointing you towards something that isn't as finished as you thought. And if you're feeling that today, I want you to trust it. The moon in Gemini today is also doing something interesting in terms of our capacity for words. Gemini is, at its core, about language, about our ability to name things, to communicate, to reach across the space between ourselves and another person with intention. And today, that capacity feels more available than usual. Words that might normally stick in your throat, thoughts that might normally remain half-formed, feelings that you might usually keep to yourself. Today, there's a quality to the energy that makes expression feel more possible. This doesn't mean it's easy. I want to be clear about that. The courage is still required. The vulnerability is still required. But the door is open wider today than it might have been last week. And sometimes that's all the difference. If you've been waiting for a sign, I want to gently suggest that this might be it. Not in an over-the-top, cosmic certainty kind of way. Just in the quiet, reasonable human way that says, Today feels different. Today something has softened. Today might be the day to take the small step you've been putting off. Send the message. Make the call. Say the thing you've been meaning to say. Or simply allow yourself to feel what you feel about someone, fully and without judgment, and see where that honesty takes you internally. Sometimes the shift begins inside, and the outer change follows from there. I want to take a moment to talk about the particular kind of loneliness that can settle in around relationships. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being with someone and feeling the distance anyway. I think a lot of people know this feeling and don't have a great name for it. It's not quite disconnection. It's more like two people occupying the same space while quietly living in different inner worlds. You talk, but not about the things that really matter. You're together, but you're both a little absent. And after a while, that absence starts to feel like the baseline, and you stop noticing it because it's just become the texture of the relationship. Today's energy has a way of making that texture visible again, not in a painful, confrontational way, more like walking past a mirror and catching a glimpse of yourself that reminds you of something. A reminder that closeness is something you have to keep choosing, that it doesn't just sustain itself automatically, that it requires small, consistent acts of reaching, asking the real question instead of the easy one, saying the honest thing instead of the convenient one, showing up with your actual attention rather than just your physical presence. For some of you watching this, the relationship that needs tending today isn't a distant one. It's the one right in front of you, the person you live with or work with or speak to every day but haven't truly reached across to in a long time. And sometimes that's the harder reconnection, not the dramatic one across years and distance, but the quiet, humble one across the dinner table, the one that requires you to put down the phone or the distraction or the version of yourself that's been going through the motions and actually be present with someone who has been present with you. If that's where today's energy is pointing for you, I want to encourage you to follow it. A small, genuine moment of real connection can shift the entire feeling of a relationship. One honest conversation, one question that you actually wait to hear the answer to, one moment of letting someone see something real about how you're doing. These things matter more than we usually give them credit for. As we move through the rest of today, I want you to pay attention to the small things, the unexpected name that pops up on your screen, the memory that surfaces while you're doing something routine, the question that suddenly feels answerable when it didn't before. These small things are often how significant shifts announce themselves, not with fanfare, but with a quiet tap on the shoulder. The energy today is not loud, it's not dramatic. It's gentle and a little searching, the way Gemini moon energy often is. It has a quality of curiosity, a wondering about people, about what's still possible, about the connections that still have life in them. And if you tune into that wondering rather than dismissing it, I think you might find something worth following. Whatever this day brings you in terms of your relationships, the ones that are thriving, the ones that are strained, the ones that have gone quiet, the ones that ended and still echo, I hope you'll hold it all with care. I hope you'll allow yourself to be moved by it, to be honest about it, to be braver than you might have been yesterday. Because today, the energy genuinely supports that. Today, the distance between people feels a little smaller, and that matters. Before I close out today's video, I want to sit with something for just a moment. I think one of the most quietly profound things about relationships is that they exist in time in a way that almost nothing else does. A song is a song. It's the same song whether you listen to it today or in 10 years. But a relationship is always changing, always accumulating, always being shaped by what's happening and what's been said and what's been left unsaid. And because of that, it's never fully possible to know what something still holds until you look at it clearly right now with fresh eyes. Today is a day for fresh eyes. Today is a day to look at the people in your life, the ones who are still there, the ones who have drifted, the ones who are somewhere in between, and ask yourself honestly what you feel and what you want, and what might be worth the small risk of reaching out. The moon in Gemini today won't last forever. This particular quality in the air is specific to right now, to today's energy. But the insight you gain today, the clarity you find, the message you send, or the decision you make, those can last. Those can ripple forward in ways that genuinely matter. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If anything I said landed for you, if something in today's energy felt familiar or timely or true, I'd really love to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me what's coming up for you in terms of your relationships. Are you feeling that pull towards someone today? Is there a conversation that's been sitting in the back of your mind? I read as many of your comments as I can, and I genuinely love hearing what you're experiencing. And if this kind of grounded, thoughtful astrology content is something that resonates with you, I'd be grateful if you subscribed so you don't miss future videos. I put a lot of care into these, and knowing that they're reaching people who find them meaningful is what makes it worth doing. Take good care of yourself today. Pay attention to the small things, and if someone crosses your mind more than once, maybe don't ignore that.